The door to the conference room slammed open, and the cold voice of the billionaire echoed through the room. "Get her out of here." The words cut through the tension like a knife. Maya Williams stood in the middle of the room, trembling not from fear, but from the shock of the situation. The polished conference table stretched out in front of her, filled with suits and ties, the air thick with the smell of expensive cologne. But it wasn't the high-end perfumes or the sleek furniture that made her heart race. It was the eyes of the man who had just thrown her out of his meeting. Her boss. The billionaire. And he didn't even know her name. He only saw her as the help. "Now," he snapped, motioning to the security guard. "You have no place here." Maya stood her ground, her breath shallow but steady. She wasn't going to let him see her break. She wasn't going to let him or anyone else in this room know just how badly they'd gotten under her skin. With her uniform and her name tag, she knew she looked like just another servant. But what they didn't know was that she had a mind as sharp as any of them. Her eyes darted to the corner of the room, where the contract sat, unnoticed by everyone except her. It was a simple mistake. A small clause, buried in legal jargon, that no one had seen. No one except her. Maya had always been different. While others spent their time scrolling through their phones, Maya read the fine print of every document she touched. It wasn't just boredom, it was survival. Her mother had worked for years as a cleaner, scraping by, never questioning the rules. But Maya was different. She could read between the lines. She knew when something didn't add up. And today, she knew she had caught something big. As she approached the table, her hands shook slightly. But she wasn't going to be intimidated. She had already given them a chance to fix it, but no one listened. Not until now. "I need to talk to you about the merger agreement," Maya said, her voice calm but firm. Her words hung in the air, a challenge no one had expected from someone like her. The room fell silent. A few of the executives shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. They weren't used to being interrupted by someone like Maya, not used to having someone from the cleaning staff, someone who was supposed to remain invisible, speak out. "Maya, you don't belong here," one of the men said, his voice dripping with condescension. He was one of the senior partners, someone who had likely never lifted a finger in his life. He probably didn't even know the cost of a cleaning product. "I think you should leave," he added, his eyes narrowing. But Maya wasn't about to back down. She had seen the clause. It was a trap, a hidden liability that could cost the company millions if the deal went through without anyone noticing. She had to say something. She had to make them listen. "This clause," she said, her voice growing stronger, "it flips the liability onto Hale Investments. If the merger fails, if there are lawsuits or defaults, your company takes the fall." She pointed at the document on the table. Her eyes were steady, not showing a hint of doubt. "You've all missed it." Silence. The room had gone deathly still. The billionaire, Jackson Hale, stared at her. His pen hovered over the page, and for the first time, Maya saw uncertainty flash across his face. She had their attention. And for a moment, just a moment, Maya felt a flicker of power that she had never felt before. No one had ever taken her seriously in this world of suits and ties. But right now, they were hanging on her every word. "How do you know about this?" Jackson's voice broke through the silence. His tone wasn't mocking now, it was a mix of suspicion and disbelief. Maya didn't flinch. "I read it," she said simply. "I read everything." The tension in the room was palpable. No one spoke. The security guard stood awkwardly by the door, unsure whether to escort her out or wait for further instructions. But Maya didn't need to be escorted. She wasn't going anywhere, not until she had said what she came here to say. "You're about to sign away the company's future," she added, her voice quiet but certain. "If you don't fix this clause, you'll be the one holding the bag." Jackson stared at her, his face now a mask of uncertainty. A few of the other executives were whispering among themselves, trying to process what Maya had just pointed out. The silence stretched on, and Maya held her ground. She wasn't backing down. Not this time. She had been invisible for too long. She had been the maid, the help, but today, she had shown them all that she was more than just a cleaner. Today, she had saved them. Today, she had saved them all. I fidgeted nervously, unsure if I should say more. They were all still staring at me, their eyes filled with disbelief. It felt like the weight of the room had shifted entirely. The hum of the air conditioning, the distant clicking of heels down the hallway, all of it seemed to fade as I stood there, holding my ground. It was clear that I had caught their attention, but would they listen? Would they truly hear me? The silence felt suffocating. You can't possibly understand the gravity of what you're saying. One of the executives finally broke the silence, his voice filled with skepticism. He was tall, with a well-groomed beard, and had an air of arrogance that made him seem untouchable. But there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of doubt. He hadn't expected a janitor, a cleaning lady, to hold his multi-million-dollar deal in her hands. "I understand it more than you think," I said, my voice steady despite the rapid heartbeat pounding in my chest. "This clause is meant to protect one party at the expense of everyone else. If you sign this, you'll be putting your company at serious risk." My words hung in the air like a challenge, daring them to call my bluff. For a moment, no one said anything. Then, Jackson Hale, the billionaire, spoke. His voice was much softer now, less commanding than before, almost as if he were reconsidering something. "You're certain about this?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the document in front of him. The power dynamic in the room had shifted. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was the person who held the truth. "I'm sure," I replied, watching his face carefully. His eyes narrowed as he glanced back at the page. He flicked through the contract with quick motions, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. The room remained tense, the executives around him whispering to each other. It was as if they couldn't quite grasp that I, someone who had cleaned their offices and taken out their trash, was now the one standing in front of them with the power to change the course of their company's future. Jackson leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. For the first time since I entered the room, his expression was unreadable. "We need to verify this," he said, his voice low, almost to himself. "I'll have our legal team look over it." I nodded, not letting my guard down. This was the moment where my fate and their fate hung in balance. I had no idea what would happen next, but I knew that I had made my stand. "You have no idea what you've done," one of the executives muttered under his breath, his tone venomous. "You've embarrassed us all." His words stung, but I refused to let them show. Instead, I stood there silently, waiting for Jackson to make his move. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. The once confident billionaire seemed to be grappling with the reality of the situation. His pen hovered over the document, then hovered again, as if he was trying to make sense of what had just been revealed. Slowly, he set the pen down, his eyes locked on the clause I had pointed out. "I'm going to have to call for a full review of this," Jackson said, his voice sharp, yet tinged with something else, something I couldn't quite place. The room remained in an uneasy quiet, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. For a brief moment, no one spoke. They were all processing the weight of my words. For years, I had been invisible, nothing more than a maid in their eyes. But today, for the first time, I had made them see me. "You've done a good job," Jackson finally said, looking at me with a mixture of confusion and something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. "You've saved this company." His voice was still strong, but there was a note of respect there now. The room was still, everyone taking in the fact that the woman they had underestimated had just saved them from making a catastrophic mistake. The shame of it all was palpable. The executives exchanged glances, their arrogance now replaced by a collective sense of unease. "I expect a full report by the end of the day," Jackson added, his tone back to business. As they scrambled to handle the mess I had uncovered, I stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the shift in power. I was still just the maid. I was still just cleaning their mess, making sure their lives ran smoothly. But now, they would have to see me. They would have to acknowledge that I was more than just the person who picked up their trash. I was the person who saved them. I took a deep breath and turned to leave, not waiting for their thanks, not expecting it. As the door closed behind me, I couldn't help but feel a small, quiet satisfaction. I had done it. I had stood up, and for the first time, I had made them listen. I walked out of the conference room, my steps steady despite the chaos I had just caused. The air outside the room felt cooler, the fluorescent lights dimming behind me. It was surreal, knowing that I had just changed everything in that room, but also realizing how quickly things could go back to how they were. I was just the janitor, after all. I was used to being invisible. As I made my way to the elevator, my heart was still pounding, but now it was mixed with an unsettling quiet. The sudden shift in power didn't feel as victorious as I imagined. I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would they keep me around? Or would they pretend this never happened, and I'd go back to being a ghost in the building, cleaning up after their messes? I knew that the game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Maya, I froze. The voice behind me made my shoulders tense. I turned slowly, already bracing myself for whatever was coming next. Jackson Hale was walking toward me, his usually confident stride now uncertain, his face more serious than I had ever seen it. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. I nodded, my palms suddenly sweaty. The elevator doors opened, but I didn't move to step inside. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to follow him, or if I should just leave, let the moment pass. But Jackson was already ahead, his long strides pulling him toward the employee lounge. I followed. I had no choice. As we walked in silence, the usual hum of the building seemed to fade into the background. The hum of the air conditioning, the chatter of employees, it all felt distant. Jackson stopped in front of the lounge, turning to face me. His eyes were intense, searching, as though he was trying to figure out whether he had made a mistake by confronting me or not. "What you did today," he began, his words slow, as though testing them before he said them out loud. "You saved my company." I felt a strange knot twist in my stomach. I hadn't expected that. "But I need to know why," he continued, his voice softer now. "Why would you speak up? Why would you risk your job for something like this?" I took a breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't easy. "I don't want to be invisible anymore," I said quietly. "I've worked here for years, watching people make decisions that hurt everyone, and I couldn't let it happen this time." I met his gaze, surprised at how steady my voice was. I saw something, and I couldn't just walk away like I always do. I had to say something. For a moment, Jackson didn't speak. He was staring at me, as if he couldn't quite grasp what I had just said. "You could have lost everything," he finally said, shaking his head. "You could have walked away, but instead, you chose to speak up. You risked it all for something you believed in." He was right. I had risked everything. In that moment, I had thrown away my silence for something bigger, something more important than just doing my job. But now, as I stood there, facing the billionaire who had always looked down on me, I wasn't sure if I had made the right choice. "It wasn't about the money or the company," I said, my voice steady. "It was about doing the right thing. No one else was paying attention, so I did." Jackson's expression softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. He let out a long breath and took a step back. "You've got guts, Maya," he said quietly. "That's something I don't see often, and I respect it." I swallowed hard. Respect from him? The man who had dismissed me for years, who had never even seen me as more than the maid? I didn't know how to process that. "Look," he said, after a brief pause, "we need someone like you here, someone who sees things others don't. I'm offering you a chance, more responsibility, more pay, a position with more power." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him correctly. "A position? A real position?" "I've spent years cleaning your floors," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But I've never wanted to be just that." Jackson nodded slowly. "I understand, and I want to change that. You've proven yourself today." The words felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest, but at the same time, they felt foreign, like I wasn't supposed to be the one getting this kind of opportunity. "So," Jackson continued, "I'll let you think about it. No pressure, but this is your chance to finally get the respect you deserve." I stood there for a moment, trying to process it all. This was a turning point, a moment where everything could change, where I could stop being invisible. But I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave behind the safety of the shadows, the comfort of being unnoticed. "Thank you," I said, my voice low but sincere. "I'll think about it." Jackson gave me a small nod, his expression softening. "Take your time," he said. "Just know that this opportunity won't last forever." As he walked away, I stood there, unsure of what the future held. But for the first time, I felt like I had control. like I was more than just the maid, like I was someone who mattered. The following days felt like a blur. I couldn't escape the whirlwind that had been set in motion after that meeting. I spent my nights lying awake, replaying every moment in my mind, wondering if I had made the right decision. The offer from Jackson weighed heavily on my mind. A part of me wanted to say yes, to finally break free from the role I had played for so long, being invisible, unnoticed, just the help. But another part of me was terrified. What would it mean to step into the light? To finally be seen for who I was and not just what I did for a living? It was a Saturday morning when I finally made my decision. The office was quiet, most people were out, and the building felt like a different world, less cold, less intimidating. I had worked here for years, and yet I had never felt like I truly belonged. Today, though, something had changed. I walked into the conference room where Jackson had asked me to meet him. He was already there, sitting at the head of the table, his usually confident demeanor tempered with a quiet anticipation. When he saw me, he gave me a small, almost reluctant smile. "Maya, I'm glad you could make it," he said, standing up. I nodded, my heart racing. This was it. I had come to a decision, but now, standing here, it felt harder than I thought it would be. "I've thought about it," I said, my voice steady but my hands were still trembling slightly. "And I've made my choice." Jackson's eyes searched mine, waiting for me to continue. "I want to take the offer," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "But not just for the job. I want to do something that matters. I want to make sure I don't lose myself in all of this." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I understand," he said quietly. "You're not just here to fill a position, Maya. You're here because you've proven you can make a difference." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "But I need to warn you, it won't be easy. There will be challenges. People may question you, and some may not be happy about your promotion. But if you're willing to fight for it, you have a chance to prove yourself." I could feel the weight of his words. He was right. The path ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be people who resented me, who saw my promotion as a threat. But I was done with being afraid. I was done with staying in the shadows. I had worked too hard to let this chance slip away. "I'm ready," I said, more confidently than I felt. Jackson's eyes softened, and he took a step closer to me. "I knew you would be," he said, his voice quieter now. "You've already proven you have what it takes." He reached out and handed me a folder, my new job description, responsibilities, and a contract. It was all laid out in black and white. My future was no longer a question. It was real. I took the folder from him, feeling the weight of it in my hands, but also feeling like a new chapter of my life was finally beginning. "I'll do my best," I said, looking him in the eye. "I'm not going to let you down." Jackson gave me another smile, one that held a mixture of pride and something else, perhaps understanding. "I know you won't," he said. As I walked out of that conference room, folder in hand, it was as if the world had shifted. The halls that had once felt so empty, so cold, now felt like they belonged to me too. I had earned this moment. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to finally step into my own life, to take control of my future. The elevator ride down to the ground floor felt different. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this building years ago, unsure and invisible. Today, I was someone with a future, with a purpose. The doors opened, and I walked out into the lobby, a little taller than before, my head held high. The sun was shining through the glass doors, and for the first time, I felt like I was stepping into my own light. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing: I was ready to face it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new challenges and growing pains. I had taken the job, stepped into a role I never imagined I would hold, but now, reality hit me in full force. People weren't exactly welcoming. Some of the older executives looked at me like I didn't belong, a few whispered behind my back, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. But there was also something else: respect. I could feel it in the way people started approaching me with questions, with problems to solve. At first, it was small things, emails that needed responding to, scheduling meetings, organizing a few documents. But slowly, those small tasks grew. The projects started coming my way, and with them came decisions that mattered. The feeling of being taken seriously was both exhilarating and terrifying. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was now the person that other people looked to for answers. One day, I was sitting in the conference room, reviewing a project proposal when Jackson Hale walked in. He didn't look the same as he did before. He wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire who dismissed me as the help. He was different now, and so was I. "Maya, can we talk?" His voice was casual, but there was something more in his tone, something that told me this wasn't a routine meeting. I nodded, setting the proposal aside and making space for him at the table. "Of course," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He sat down across from me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. "I've been watching you," Jackson said, his voice low. "You're doing good work. Better than I expected, actually. But there's more to this job than just handling projects and managing people." I raised an eyebrow, unsure where he was going with this. "What do you mean?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes intense. "This company is going through some major changes. The board is pushing for a shift in direction, and there are a lot of people in this room who are going to be fighting for control." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. "I need someone who can see past the politics, someone who isn't afraid to speak up and make the hard decisions. I need you, Maya." I stared at him, a chill running through me. The weight of his words was heavy, and I could feel the responsibility settling in. I had always been the one who stayed out of the spotlight, the one who avoided conflict. But now, Jackson was asking me to step into the ring, to fight for what was right. "You're not asking for much," I said with a dry laugh, trying to mask my nerves. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "It's not about asking," he said, his voice serious. "This is about the future of the company. We need to make a choice. Either we push forward and take risks, or we play it safe and risk losing everything." I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had spent so many years being the quiet one, the invisible one. But now, I was being handed the chance to shape something bigger than myself. "So what's the next step?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the storm of thoughts racing through my mind. Jackson looked at me for a moment, his gaze assessing. "I'm going to need you to lead a team, a new strategy, a new vision. We're going to need someone who can see the bigger picture and make the right calls. I want you to be that person." My heart was pounding now. Lead a team, make decisions. This was more than I had ever imagined. But it was also everything I had dreamed of, the chance to prove myself, to show that I was more than just the help. "I'm ready," I said, my voice more confident than I felt. Jackson smiled, a real smile this time. "Good. You've got what it takes, Maya. I know it." He stood up, extending his hand toward me. I shook it firmly, feeling the weight of what was coming next. As he walked out of the room, I sat there for a moment, letting his words sink in. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I wasn't just someone who cleaned up other people's messes. I was the one making the decisions now. The power had shifted, but with it came a new weight, a new pressure. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, and there would be people who would try to tear me down, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready to face whatever came next. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, late nights, and intense decision-making. I found myself managing a team, handling important projects, and navigating through a maze of office politics. It was exhilarating but also overwhelming. I had never thought I would be in this position, and there were moments when the weight of it all felt too much. I wasn't just handling logistics or answering emails anymore. Now, I was leading strategic initiatives that could make or break the future of the company. One day, I walked into the office, ready for another busy day, when I noticed something strange. The usual hum of activity seemed more tense. The chatter in the hallways was quieter, and even the air felt heavier. Something was off. As I made my way to my desk, one of the senior managers approached me with a concerned expression. "Maya, we need to talk," she said, her voice low. I followed her into the conference room, where a few other executives were already gathered. I could tell from the look on their faces that this was serious. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "There's been a shift," the manager began. "The board is questioning some of your recent decisions. They're not sure you're the right person to lead the new direction." My stomach dropped. I knew this was coming. People had been whispering behind my back since I was promoted, but I had hoped they would give me a chance to prove myself. Now, it seemed like the moment of truth had arrived. "What exactly are they questioning?" I asked, my voice steady but my hands were trembling slightly. "They're questioning the new projects we've taken on," another executive chimed in. "The risk is high, and some of them feel you're moving too fast. There's talk of pulling back." My heart raced as I listened. I had been given this opportunity because Jackson believed in me. He had seen something in me that others hadn't, but now it seemed like the board wasn't so sure. "We need to make some adjustments," the manager said. "They want to see results, and they want to see them quickly. If you can't deliver, they'll pull the plug." My mind was spinning. I had worked so hard to get here, and now it felt like everything was on the line. I had to make a choice, either step up and prove myself, or risk losing everything. "I understand," I said, taking a deep breath. "I'll do whatever it takes." I walked out of that room with a sense of determination. The board's doubts had planted a seed of fear in my mind, but I refused to let it grow. I wasn't going to let anyone take this away from me. I had worked too hard to get here, and I was going to prove that I deserved this position. That afternoon, I stayed late, going over every project, every proposal, every strategy. I knew I had to show the board that I wasn't just lucky that I had a plan and the ability to execute it. I couldn't afford to let them see me falter. The next week, I presented my revised plan to the board. I had spent hours tweaking every detail, ensuring that it not only minimized risk but also demonstrated the potential for significant growth. When I finished, there was a long silence in the room. My heart pounded as I waited for their response. Jackson was sitting at the head of the table, watching me closely. "This is more like it," one of the board members said finally, breaking the silence. "The risks are still there, but you've addressed them. You've shown us that you have a solid plan." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but there was still more to come. "There's one condition," the board member continued. "We want to see results within the next quarter. If this plan doesn't deliver, we'll have to reevaluate." My stomach churned at the pressure, but I nodded. I had made it this far, and now I had to prove myself all over again. I spent the next few months pushing forward, working around the clock, staying focused on the big picture. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The results started to show. Projects that seemed risky at first began to pay off. Clients signed on. The team grew more confident in my leadership. One evening, as I was reviewing the final reports for the quarter, I got a call from Jackson. "Maya," he said, his voice sounding different this time. "I just wanted to let you know that the board's impressed. They're pleased with the results." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet. "I couldn't have done it without your support." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You earned this, Maya," Jackson said. "You've proven yourself. You've shown everyone that you belong here." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. I had made it. I had faced the doubt, the fear, and the pressure, and I had come out stronger on the other side. For the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged, like I had earned my place. It had been a year since I first walked into that office as a maid, unnoticed, a part of the background in the massive halls of Jackson Hale's company. A year of proving myself, of breaking boundaries, and facing challenges that tested every part of me. Now, I was sitting at the head of a boardroom table, surrounded by the very people who had once looked at me with disdain. The weight of the moment was not lost on me. This was the culmination of everything I had fought for, every late night, every sacrifice. Jackson stood at the back of the room, watching me, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The room was quiet, the kind of silence that makes your heart race. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. I had earned their respect, but I knew there was still more to prove. "Maya," Jackson said, breaking the silence, "you've done something no one here thought possible. You turned this company around. But there's one more challenge." I looked up at him, unsure of what was coming. He stepped forward, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "There's a merger happening. A big one. This is going to test everything. We need you to lead it." My heart skipped a beat. A merger. This was it, the big test. This was the kind of project that could make or break a career. If I succeeded, I would solidify my place here forever. If I failed, it could all come crashing down. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm ready," I said, my voice firm. "Let's do it." The room was filled with murmurs. I could see the doubt in some faces, the excitement in others. This wasn't just any merger, it was a game changer. One wrong move and everything we had worked for could be destroyed. But I wasn't going to let that happen. "I'll need full access to everything," I continued. "I'll need the team, the data, and every bit of information we can get. This is about making sure we come out ahead, not just survive." Jackson nodded, his gaze sharp. "You'll have everything you need, but I'm warning you, it won't be easy. There are some powerful people involved, and they don't like being challenged." I smiled, though it felt tight. I've been challenging people my whole life. Jackson's lips twitched, almost a smile, and then he turned to the others in the room. "Everyone, follow Maya's lead. This is her project now." With that, he left the room, leaving me with the weight of the task ahead. As the door closed behind him, I felt the room shift. I wasn't just a part of the team anymore. I was leading it. Over the next few weeks, the pressure mounted. Every decision felt like it carried the weight of the world. I was no longer just handling the logistics of projects. I was now navigating the storm of corporate power, old alliances, and fierce competition. There were moments when I wanted to throw in the towel. The pushback from some of the board members was relentless, and the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered why I was doing this. I had spent so many years living in the shadows, waiting for someone to notice me. Now, I was the one in control. It wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could do it, that I was worthy of this position. The day of the final presentation arrived. I stood in front of the board once again, my team behind me, ready to present our strategy for the merger. The tension in the room was palpable, but this time, it was different. This time, I had a plan that could work. I spoke confidently, laying out every detail, every contingency, every possible outcome. I could feel the eyes on me, the judgment, but I didn't flinch. I had earned this moment. By the end of the presentation, there was a long silence. I could hear the faint sound of a chair scraping against the floor as someone shifted. Then Jackson spoke, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it. "Maya, you've done it. This is the plan that will carry us forward." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It wasn't just approval, it was acknowledgement. I had done it. I had led the way. The board members nodded, some of them even exchanging looks of surprise. I could see the respect in their eyes now. They had doubted me at first, but now, they couldn't deny it. I was one of them. As the meeting adjourned, and everyone filed out of the room, Jackson stayed behind. He walked over to me, a smile playing on his lips. "You did it, Maya. I knew you had it in you." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "Thanks," I said, my voice a little softer than usual. "But this is just the beginning." Jackson raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. "I like your attitude," he said, before turning and walking away. As I stood there, looking out the window at the city below, I realized something. I had come a long way from the janitor's closet. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And I was ready for whatever came next. It had been a few months since the merger, and things were starting to settle into place. I had proven myself, not just to the board, but to myself. My team was functioning well. The projects we had launched were succeeding, and I was finally gaining the respect I had always wanted. But just when I thought things were looking up, I got a call that would change everything. It was early in the morning when my phone rang, the familiar number flashing across the screen. "Jackson." "Maya," he said, his voice serious. "I need you to come to my office. Now." I could hear the urgency in his voice. Something was off. I quickly gathered my things and headed to his office, my mind racing with questions. What could be so urgent? When I arrived, Jackson was standing by the window, looking out over the city, his back to me. "Close the door," he said without turning around. I did as he asked, stepping further into the room. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the knot forming in my stomach. Jackson turned to face me, his expression tight. "There's a leak," he said, his voice low. Someone inside the company is sabotaging our progress. They're feeding information to our competitors. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had worked so hard to get to this point, to turn the company around, and now someone from within was trying to tear it all down. "How do you know?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Jackson's eyes darkened. "We've been monitoring communications, and it's clear. They've been feeding sensitive data to our rivals. We've lost key contracts because of it." My heart sank. I knew the stakes were high, but this was something I hadn't prepared for. "Who's doing this?" I asked, my mind racing through all the people I had worked with, trying to think of anyone who might have a motive. Jackson shook his head. "We don't know yet, but we need to find out. Fast." The room fell silent for a moment. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. If someone was sabotaging the company, it could all unravel. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice steady now. Jackson looked at me, his expression both serious and weary. "I need you to find out who's behind this. You've been in the trenches with these people. You know them. You can get closer to the truth than anyone else." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I had been through a lot to get here, but this was different. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. This was about saving everything I had worked for. "I'll find out who's behind this," I said, my voice firm. Jackson nodded, a small flicker of relief in his eyes. "I knew I could count on you," he said quietly. As I left his office, I felt the weight of the task ahead. The pressure was unlike anything I had faced before. I had to find the traitor within the company, someone I had worked with, trusted. I couldn't afford to fail. The next few days were a blur of late nights, long hours spent analyzing communications, cross-checking documents, and interviewing employees. I had to tread carefully, not knowing who I could trust. Every time I thought I was getting closer, the trail seemed to disappear, but I didn't give up. I couldn't. Then, one evening, after hours of digging, I found something. An email, hidden among the routine correspondence, a message to a competitor, filled with confidential details about upcoming projects and internal strategies. The sender's name was familiar. I couldn't believe it. It was someone on my own team, a trusted colleague, someone I had worked side by side with, who had shared my vision for the company's future. My heart raced as I read the email again, the betrayal sinking in. I had to act fast. I immediately called Jackson, my hands shaking as I relayed the information to him. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice cold but controlled. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady now. "I'm certain. I have the evidence." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'll take care of it," Jackson said finally, his tone sharp. "But you need to prepare yourself. This is going to be messy." The next few hours were a blur of preparation and anticipation. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me as I realized that I had uncovered the truth. I had done what I set out to do, but the weight of the situation was still heavy on my shoulders. The next morning, everything changed. The news of the betrayal spread quickly, and the fallout was immediate. The person responsible was fired, their actions publicly condemned. The company was shaken, but we moved forward, stronger for it. Jackson called me into his office later that day. "You did well, Maya," he said, his voice warm but with a hint of exhaustion. "You saved us from something much worse. I'm proud of you." I nodded, not sure what to say. I had done my job, but the cost of it had been high. The trust I had placed in people had been shattered, and the company would never be the same. But I had proven something to myself. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was someone who could stand up, face down betrayal, and fight for what was right. The next few weeks after the betrayal felt like a test of endurance. The company was moving forward, but I could feel the tension lingering in the air. People were still nervous, still unsure of what had happened and what it meant for the future. The trust that had been shattered wasn't going to be easily repaired. I had proven myself before, but this time, I had to prove something bigger, not just to Jackson, not just to the board, but to everyone who doubted me. I wasn't going to let the shadow of that betrayal define me. As I walked into the office that morning, the usual buzz of activity seemed a little quieter. People were still recovering from the fallout, but things were starting to feel like they were back on track. Jackson had called me into his office again, and this time, I wasn't sure what to expect. When I walked in, he was standing by the window, his back to me. The way he held himself was different this time. There was a weariness in his posture, a weight that hadn't been there before. "Maya," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I need to ask you something." I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to turn around, to look me in the eye. When he did, his gaze was intense, filled with something I couldn't quite read. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady but my heart beating faster. Jackson hesitated for a moment, then walked over to his desk. He picked up a folder, something I hadn't seen before, and handed it to me. "This is the new direction for the company," he said. "It's a bold move, and it's going to require someone who can lead us through uncharted territory." I opened the folder, scanning through the pages. It was a new vision, a new strategy for growth, but it was risky in a way that could either pay off massively or fail spectacularly. I could feel my pulse quicken as I read through the plans, the projections, the details. "You want me to lead this?" I said, more of a statement than a question. Jackson nodded. "I trust you, Maya," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I know the last few months have been difficult, but you've shown me that you have the guts to push through when things get tough. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, and I need someone who's not afraid to take the risks that will make this company great." My mind was racing. This was the moment I had been working toward, but it was also terrifying. The risks involved in this new direction were enormous, and if I failed, it could all come crashing down. But if I succeeded, I would cement my place not just in this company, but in this industry. "I'm ready," I said, without hesitation. Jackson's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, I saw something that hadn't been there before: respect, not just for what I had done, but for who I was becoming. "Good," he said, his voice steady now. "Then let's make it happen." The weight of his words settled in my chest. This wasn't just about taking a job or making a name for myself anymore. This was about defining who I was. I had spent so many years being afraid to speak up, afraid to take risks. But now, I was standing at the edge, ready to jump into the unknown. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and planning. I had to assemble a team of people I could trust, people who would work with me to make this vision a reality. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I was no longer just the maid, no longer just the one who cleaned the offices. I was leading a team, making decisions that would shape the future of the company. And as we moved forward, I saw the change in the people around me. The skepticism that had lingered at first started to fade, replaced by something else: hope. We were taking risks, but we were doing it together. Every decision felt like a step toward something bigger, something that could change the way we worked, the way we saw the world. And for the first time, I truly felt like I belonged. The morning of the first big presentation for our new direction arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. This was the moment. The room was filled with board members, executives, and investors, people whose decisions could either make or break the future of this company. As I stood at the front of the room, my heart pounded in my chest. But this time, it was different. I wasn't afraid. I had prepared for this, and I knew my vision was sound. As I spoke, I could feel the room shifting, the energy changing. They were listening. They were buying into the idea. By the end of the presentation, there was a silence, a charged, expectant silence. And then, Jackson spoke. "This is exactly what we need," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Maya, you've done it again." The approval in his voice, the respect, made everything worth it. I had done it. I had taken the risks, and now, I was leading the company to a new future. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was the leader, and I had proven that I belonged. The months following the successful presentation felt like a blur of progress, hard work, and the weight of expectations. We had made it through the toughest part, but there was still a long road ahead. The company had embraced the new direction, and the risks were starting to pay off, but the real test was still to come. I was no longer the maid who cleaned the office floors. I was now a leader, a decision-maker, and every choice I made carried the weight of the entire company. But the higher you climb, the further you can fall. One late afternoon, as I was going over some financial reports, I received an unexpected email. It was from a name I hadn't seen in a while: Veronica Ellison. the hotel's general manager. I remembered her well from the day I stood up to the billionaire and saved the merger. She had been the one to take a chance on me back then, offering her support when I had no idea where my life would go. Her email was brief, but the message was clear. Maya, I have something you need to see. Please meet me at the old hotel. My heart skipped a beat. The old hotel? I hadn't been back there since the day I had left, after everything had changed. It was where I had found the courage to speak up, the place where everything had shifted for me. I didn't know what she wanted, but I knew I couldn't ignore her. I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat, and left the office, my mind racing with thoughts of what awaited me. When I arrived at the hotel, Veronica was waiting for me at the front entrance. Her usual commanding presence was softened by something else: concern, maybe even worry. Maya. She greeted me warmly, her voice still carrying the strength I remembered. I'm glad you could come. I nodded, still unsure of what was going on. What's this about? Veronica hesitated for a moment before leading me inside. The lobby, once bustling with staff and guests, now seemed eerily quiet, as though the building itself was holding its breath. She motioned for me to follow her to a private office at the back of the hotel. Once inside, she closed the door behind us. Maya, I need to be honest with you, she began, sitting down across from me. The hotel is in trouble. The financial situation is worse than we thought, and we're facing some serious decisions. I was taken aback. I had no idea. But I thought everything was going well, I said, my voice filled with confusion. Veronica shook her head. The numbers aren't adding up. We've been hiding losses, and if we don't act fast, we could lose everything. My stomach twisted. The hotel had been a part of my past, and it felt strange to be back here, but I couldn't just walk away. Veronica leaned in, her eyes searching mine. I need your help, Maya. You've proven yourself time and again. I don't know who else to turn to. My mind raced. This wasn't just about saving a company I had helped build, it was about doing what was right, about making sure people didn't lose their livelihoods. I thought about the team I had built, the projects we were working on, and how far I had come. I wasn't going to let this place fall apart. I'll help you, I said, my voice steady. But we're going to have to act fast. We can't waste any time. Veronica's face softened. I knew I could count on you. Over the next few days, I found myself back in the trenches, working alongside Veronica to analyze every aspect of the hotel's finances, making tough decisions, and uncovering the hidden problems. It was like stepping into the past, back into a world I thought I had left behind. But this time, I was different. I wasn't just following orders. I was in charge of my own decisions, and I wasn't afraid anymore. We worked late into the night, poring over documents, crafting strategies to save the hotel, and by the time we had a plan in place, I felt the weight of the responsibility settle in my chest. But I knew we had done everything we could. Veronica and I stood in the lobby once more, looking out over the quiet building. You saved me, Maya, she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. You've given me hope when I thought there was none left. I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. We saved this place, together. As I walked out of the hotel that night, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't expected. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, I knew I could face it. I had started this journey as a maid, an invisible woman in the background. But now, I was someone who had saved not one, but 2 organizations. I had proven myself, and in doing so, I had earned my place, not just in the office, but in the world. It had been a long, grueling few months, but as I sat at my desk, reviewing the final reports for the quarter, I felt a strange sense of calm. The company was moving in the right direction. The projects we had launched were succeeding. The board members who had once doubted me were now offering their support, and even Jackson, the billionaire who had given me this chance, seemed pleased. For the first time, I felt like I was truly in control. But just as I began to relax, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Jackson. Meet me in the conference room. Urgent. My stomach tightened. I had been expecting a call from him, but not like this. It had been months since we'd had a conversation about the company's future. Everything had been going smoothly, or so I thought. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the conference room, trying to push away the nagging feeling that something was wrong. As I entered the room, Jackson was standing by the window, his back to me. His posture was tense, his jaw set. He looked up as I walked in, and there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't the usual confidence. It was worry. "Maya," he began, his voice low. "I've got some bad news." My heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady despite the growing anxiety in my chest. Jackson turned to face me, his expression grim. "There's a problem with the new investors," he said, his voice tight. "We've been under scrutiny, and they're threatening to pull out unless we make some significant changes. The deal we've been working on could fall apart." I felt a cold rush of panic wash over me. After all the hard work, after everything we had built, it was all hanging in the balance. "How bad is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Bad," Jackson replied, running a hand through his hair. "If they pull out, we're looking at a major setback. It could cost us everything." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was the kind of crisis I had prepared for, but it was still hard to accept. After all the progress we had made, the idea that it could all slip away because of one deal, one mistake, was terrifying. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my voice more confident now. Jackson's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something else in them: respect. "I need you to fix this, Maya," he said. "You've been through the hardest part of this job, but this is the real test. I'm putting my trust in you." I felt the weight of his words settle on me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about the company anymore. This was about Jackson, too. He was trusting me, and I couldn't let him down. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said firmly, my voice full of resolve. "We'll fix this." Jackson nodded, and for the first time, I saw a hint of a smile tug at the corners of his lips. "I knew you would," he said. Over the next few days, the pressure only increased. I worked around the clock, meeting with the board, negotiating with the investors, and trying to keep everything from falling apart. The stakes were higher than ever. Every move I made was scrutinized, every decision weighed carefully. But as the days passed, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. I wasn't just reacting to the problems anymore. I was solving them. I knew the company better than anyone, knew the risks and the rewards, and most importantly, I knew the people. I used every tool I had learned over the past year, every strategy, every relationship to negotiate with the investors. And slowly, piece by piece, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The turning point came when I managed to secure a meeting with the most skeptical investor. It wasn't easy. The man was known for being tough, unwilling to budge even an inch. But I had something he needed: information, leverage, and a proposal that could benefit both sides. I walked into the meeting with nothing but my briefcase and my determination. The meeting room was silent as we sat across from each other, the tension thick in the air. But by the end of it, the deal was back on track. The investors agreed to the new terms, and the deal that had once seemed impossible was now a reality. As I walked out of that meeting, I felt the weight of the last few days lift off my shoulders. I had done it. I had saved the company. When I returned to the office, Jackson was waiting for me in his office. His usual calm demeanor was back, but there was something in his eyes that made me stop in my tracks. "You did it, Maya," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You saved us." I felt a rush of relief flood through me, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of pride. This was my moment. This was what I had worked for. "We did it," I said, my voice steady. "Together." Jackson smiled, his eyes meeting mine. "You've earned my respect, Maya. You've earned everyone's respect." I nodded, my heart swelling with pride. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was a leader. I had proven myself, and now, nothing could take that away. The months that followed felt like a continuous blur of success, challenges, and the constant pressure to perform. The company had stabilized, and the new direction we had taken was starting to show real results. Our stock prices were up, new contracts were flowing in, and the employees, once hesitant, were beginning to embrace the changes. But with every success came new challenges. It seemed like there was always something to fix, something to improve, and someone who doubted whether we could keep up the momentum. The weight of leadership was starting to take its toll, but I had learned to handle it. I was no longer the woman who had been invisible, quietly cleaning the offices. I had risen through the ranks, proving time and again that I was more than just the help. But now, as I stood on the edge of a new phase for the company, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. It was a crisp autumn morning when I received the call that would change everything. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" I said, trying to mask the uncertainty in my voice. "Maya, this is Robert Clark, chairman of the board. I need to speak with you urgently." His voice was sharp, professional, but there was an undertone of something else, something that made my stomach drop. "Of course," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "What's going on?" "It's about the merger," he said. "We have a serious problem." The merger, the very thing that had allowed the company to grow and solidify its place in the market. I had worked so hard to make it a success, but now it was on the verge of collapse. "What kind of problem?" I asked, my mind racing. Robert's tone grew more tense. "There's a legal issue, a breach of contract from one of the parties involved. If this isn't handled immediately, the entire merger could be called off." My heart sank. The merger was the linchpin holding everything together. If it fell apart, everything we had worked for would unravel. "I need you to come to the boardroom immediately," Robert continued. "We're going to need your help to fix this." I nodded, despite him not being able to see me. "I'll be there," I said, my voice steady, though my mind was already spiraling. I had faced obstacles before, but this was different. The merger wasn't just a deal, it was the future of the company, and if it collapsed, I wasn't sure where we would go from there. When I walked into the boardroom, I was met with tense, anxious faces. The board members were seated around the table, some staring at their phones, others looking up at me with a mix of hope and apprehension. Robert motioned for me to sit. "Maya," he said, his voice serious, "we need to fix this. This issue is critical." I sat down, my eyes scanning the documents laid out before me. It was a mess: contractual breaches, legal loopholes, and accusations flying between two major stakeholders. "We can't afford to let this fall apart," Robert continued. "You've been through tough situations before, and I need your expertise to get us through this one." My mind was racing as I read through the legal documents, trying to make sense of it all. "Who's behind this breach?" I asked, not looking up from the papers. Robert didn't hesitate. "It's from one of the primary investors. They've decided to pull out unless we make certain concessions." I felt my stomach tighten. I had dealt with difficult clients and investors before, but this was different. These were people who had the power to bring the company to its knees. "What kind of concessions?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "They want a significant change in leadership, including the removal of key executives," Robert said. My heart skipped a beat. They wanted to take control. It was a power play, and it could unravel everything. "We can't give in to this," I said firmly. "If we cave now, we'll be showing weakness. We'll lose everything we've fought for." The room was silent for a moment as the weight of my words settled in. Robert looked at me, his expression hard to read. "I know," he said, "but we need a strategy. Fast." I took a deep breath and pushed the papers aside. "We have two options: fight back or negotiate a new deal. If we negotiate, we'll give them some concessions, but we'll keep the leadership structure intact. If we fight, we risk losing everything. We need to move quickly." I looked around the room, meeting each of the board members' eyes. "But I'm not going to let them dictate our future. We've worked too hard for this. We're going to take the fight to them." There was a long pause before Robert spoke again. "I agree," he said, his voice steady. "We'll fight." And with that, the boardroom shifted. We had a plan, and now it was time to execute it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles, meetings, and tense negotiations. Every move we made was critical. But through it all, I kept my focus. I knew that we were on the brink of something massive, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I had been underestimated for too long. Now, I was fighting for everything I had built, and when the dust finally settled, we emerged victorious. The deal went through, the merger held, and the company was stronger than ever. As I stood in front of the boardroom, watching the faces of those who had once doubted me, I knew I had proven something to them. I wasn't just the maid. I was the one who saved this company, and nothing would ever take that away from me. It had been a long journey, filled with moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty, but as I stood there, looking out over the skyline from the company's top floor, I realized just how far I had come. The past few years had been nothing short of transformative. I had gone from being a janitor, invisible to everyone around me, to a leader, someone who had shaped the future of a company and earned the respect of those who had once dismissed me. But more than that, I had learned something invaluable. I had learned that no matter where you start, no matter how low you think you are, there is always a way to rise. The scars of my past had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I had built my future, brick by brick, through hard work, determination, and the courage to stand up when it mattered most. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. As I sat down in my office, a sense of peace washed over me. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. It was Jackson. "Maya," he said, his voice filled with that same quiet confidence that had first drawn me to him. "I just wanted to say one last time thank you." I paused, letting his words sink in. "For what?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For everything," he replied, a slight smile in his voice. "You saved this company, you saved me, and you've proven that you're not just capable, you're indispensable. I couldn't have done it without you." The weight of his words settled in my chest. I had always known I was capable, but hearing him acknowledge it felt like a validation of everything I had worked for. "I'm just doing my job," I said, my voice soft, "but I couldn't have done it without you either." Jackson chuckled lightly. "I think you would have done just fine without me." I smiled at the thought, but in the end, I knew that what had made the difference wasn't just my work, it was the belief we had in each other, the trust that had been built over time. That was what had kept us moving forward, even when the odds were stacked against us. "Well," Jackson said, breaking my train of thought, "you've earned it, all of it, and I think it's time for you to take your next step." I raised an eyebrow, wondering what he meant. "What do you mean?" "You've proven yourself as a leader," he said. "It's time you get the recognition you deserve. I've spoken to the board, and they've agreed it's time for you to take on the role of CEO." My heart skipped a beat. The CEO? The role I had once thought was out of reach. The position that seemed like an impossible dream was now within my grasp. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Jackson's voice was calm, but filled with sincerity. "You've earned it, Maya. Don't second-guess yourself. This is your time." For a moment, I was silent, overwhelmed by the weight of what he had just said. The office, the company, the responsibilities, they were all mine now. But as I looked around at the life I had built, I realized that I was ready. I had fought for this, and I had earned it. "I'll do my best," I said finally, my voice steady. "I know you will," Jackson replied, a sense of pride in his tone. "You've already done more than anyone could have expected." As I hung up the phone, a wave of realization hit me. I wasn't just a part of this company anymore. I was the one steering it forward. The challenges that had once seemed insurmountable were now opportunities to prove myself again, to show the world that I was more than just the janitor I had once been. It wasn't just about business or numbers, it was about the people who had trusted me, the team I had built, and the future we were shaping together. I stood up from my desk and walked over to the window. The city stretched out before me, the sun setting over the skyline, casting a golden light on the buildings below. It was beautiful, but it wasn't the view that took my breath away, it was the realization that I had earned my place here, not by chance, not by luck, but by hard work, determination, and the courage to believe in myself when no one else did. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I was the CEO, and for the first time, I truly felt like I belonged. In this powerful and inspirational Black story, we follow the journey of a woman who rises from humble beginnings as a maid to become the CEO of a major corporation. Her transformation is not just about achieving success in business, but also about overcoming obstacles, gaining respect, and proving her worth in a world that often overlooks her. This Black story is filled with determination, courage, and the strength to stand up against challenges that would break most people. From the struggles of being invisible in a corporate world to leading the company through a critical merger, this is a story of empowerment and self-discovery. The Black stories of resilience and triumph are brought to life as she takes charge, not only saving the company but also changing the course of her own life. Through the ups and downs, she never gives up, proving that no matter where you come from, you can achieve greatness. This Black story is a testament to the power of belief, hard work, and the will to succeed. As she navigates betrayal, power struggles, and high-stakes decisions, her journey is a true example of how anyone can rise above their circumstances and make their mark. By the end, the message is clear. Anyone, no matter their past, can overcome adversity and create a future filled with possibilities. This Black story shows that when you believe in yourself, you can conquer anything.